Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Thank you. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa Varudikacharya Ashtotar Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Varudikacharya Ashtotar Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavin Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Narayanam Namaskritya Narang Shaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiriet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayan Rishi, the supremest human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashta Prayesha Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering devotional service to the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil, and loving devotion to the Supreme Lord, who is glorified in transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 31st day of March 2021 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. We are in Canto 4, the creation of the fourth order. Chapter 29 talks between Narada and King Prachinabarhi. Texts numbered 76 and 77, and we'll chant 76 together. Yata Chanajalukeyam Napayati Apayati Cha Natchajain Miyamanopi Prag Dehabhimatim Janaha Yata Chanajalukeyam Napayati Cha Natchajain Miyamanopi Pragdehabhimatim Janaha Yata Chanajalukeyam Napayati Cha Natchajain Miyamanopi Pragdehabhimatim Janaha. Please chant. Yata Chanajalukeyam Napayati Cha Natchajain Miyamanopi Pragdehabhimatim Janaha. Yata Chanajalukeyam Napayati Cha Natchajain Miyamanopi Dehabhimatim Janaha. Yata Chanajalukeyam Napayati Cha Natchajain Miyamanopi Pragdehabhimatim Janaha. Yata Chanajalukeyam Napayati Cha Natchajain Miyamanopi Pragdehabhimatim Janaha. Yata, as Chanajaluka, caterpillar, Yam, this, Na, Apayati, does not go, Apayati, goes, Cha, also, Na, not, Chajait, gives up, Miyamanaha, at the point of death, Api, even, Prak, former, Deha, with the body, Abhimatim, identification, Janaha, a person. I'll chant the second one myself. Yavaranyam nabindeta vyavadhani nakarmanam mana eva manushyendra bhutanam bhavabhavanam. Translation. The caterpillar transports itself from one leaf to another by capturing one leaf before giving up the other. Similarly, according to his previous work, the living entity must capture another body before giving up the one he has. This is because the mind is the reservoir of all kinds of desires. Purport. A living entity too much absorbed in material activity becomes very much attracted to the material body. Even at the point of death, he thinks of his present body and the relatives connected to it. Thus he remains fully absorbed in the bodily conception of life, so much so that even at the point of death, he abhors leaving his present body. Sometimes it is found that a person on the verge of death remains in a coma for many days before giving up the body. This is common among so-called leaders and politicians who think that without their presence the entire country and all society will be in chaos. This is called Maya. Political leaders do not like to leave their political posts, and they either have to be shot by an enemy or obliged to leave by the arrival of death. By superior arrangement, a living entity is offered another body, but because of his attraction to the present body, he does not like to transfer himself to another body. Thus he is forced to accept another body by the laws of nature. Prakate kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashaha ahankara mudhatma kartaham iti manyate. Okay, I'm going to read the translation from the Big Bhagavad Gita. The spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the three modes of material nature. Material nature is very strong, and the material modes force one to accept another body. This force is visible when the living entity transmigrates from a superior body to an inferior one. One who acts like a dog or hog in the present body will certainly be forced to accept the body of a dog or hog in the next life. A person may be enjoying the body of a prime minister or a president, but when he understands that he will be forced to accept the body of a dog or hog, he chooses not to leave the present body. Therefore he lies in a coma many days before death. This has been experienced by many politicians at the time of death. The conclusion is that the next body is already determined by superior control. The living entity immediately gives up the present body and enters another. Sometimes in the present body, the living entity feels that many of his desires and imaginations are not fulfilled. Those who are overly attracted to their life situation are forced to remain in a ghostly body and are not allowed to accept another gross body. Even in the body of a ghost, they create disturbances for neighbors and relatives. The mind is the prime cause of such a situation. According to one's mind, different types of bodies are generated, and one is forced to accept them. As confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 8.6, Yang yang vapi smarang bhavam, let's all together, those who know it. Yang yang vapi smarang bhavam, chajatyante kalevaram, tang tame vaiti konteya, sadatad bhava bhavitaha. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, that state he will attain without fail. Within one's body and mind, one can think as either a dog or a god, and the next life is offered to him accordingly. This is explained in the Bhagavad Gita 13.22. All together. Purusha prakatisto hi bhunkte prakatijang gunam karanam gunasangosya sadasadyoni janmasu. The living entity in material nature thus follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of nature. This is due to his association with that material nature. Thus he meets with good and evil among various species. Close quote. The living entity may transmigrate to either a superior or inferior body according to his association with the modes of material nature. If he associates with the mode of ignorance, he gets the body of an animal or an inferior man. But if he associates with the mode of goodness or passion, he gets a body accordingly. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 14.18. Urdvam gachanti satvasta madhye tishtanti rajasaha chaganya guna vrittista ado gachanti tamasaha. Those situated in the mode of goodness gradually go upward to the higher planets. Those in the mode of passion live on the earthly planets, and those in the mode of ignorance go down to the hellish worlds. The root cause of one's association is the mind. This great Krishna consciousness movement is the greatest boon to human society, because it is teaching everyone to think always of Krishna by executing devotional service. In this way, at the end of life, one may be transferred to the association of Krishna. This is technically called Nitya Leela Pravishta, entering into the planet of Goloka Vrindavan. The Bhagavad Gita 18.55 explains, Bhaktya mam abhijanati yavanyaschasmi tattvataha tato mam tattvato gyatva vishate tadanantadam. Lord Krishna says, one can understand me as I am, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only by devotional service. And when one is in full consciousness of me by such devotion, he can enter into the kingdom of God. Okay. After the mind is completely absorbed in Krishna consciousness, one can enter the planet known as Goloka Vrindavan. To enter the association of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one has to understand Krishna. The process of understanding Krishna is devotional service. After understanding Krishna as he is, one can become eligible to enter Krishna Loka and associate with him. The mind is the cause of such an exalted position. The mind can also get one a body like those of dogs and hogs. To absorb the mind always in Krishna consciousness is therefore the greatest perfection of human life. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So I find it interesting that after all we've read now of chapters of this allegory of the Paranjan, and now the explanation, extensive explanation, and as I think you mentioned, one of the longest chapters in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in terms of length of number of verses. Narada Muni is explaining like basic Krishna consciousness, basic philosophy of the soul's transmigration. What do we hear from in the Bhagavad Gita when Lord Krishna begins his instruction? Third verse, text 13 of chapter 12, exactly this. Dehi nosmin yata dehe kaumaram yovanang jada tata dehantara praptir dhiras tatra nabuyate. That the soul, the living entity, is passing through different stages of the body. The body constantly changes, the soul remains the same. And at the final stage, he gets another body at death. The dhira, the sober person, is not bewildered by such a change. And not only that, but that very fact, if we accept that simple, really inconceivable truth, inconceivable by those who are simply relying on the senses and the mind to figure things out, the scientists. You can't understand that. You cannot see the soul, you cannot understand the soul by empirical means. But this basic truth of spiritual knowledge changes it should change everything in terms of our calculations of what's important to do and what's important to cultivate in this lifetime. Because suddenly it opens up a vast vista, both forward and backward, to understanding who we really are and what life really means. Otherwise, as Prabhupada so cogently said, under the spell of Maya, under the illusion, we're completely identified with this one particular body. And not just a human life. Everybody is doing that. In the lower species, of course, they don't cogitate about it and philosophize about it, but they're completely identifying with that particular body. Here, this wonderful word, which it's unique, I think, jaluka, the caterpillar. Trina jaluka. Trina is a little, trinado pisunichena, a little blade of grass. So, I don't know if you've ever seen, many of you may have seen how the caterpillar, he's got that thing where he goes, and he's looking, is there a secure spot? Okay, I got another spot. Now you move, And then he goes on and on like that. So this compared here in this verse is that we're developing our next body in this body, because it's all based on the mind. It's all based on the content of your subtle body. And that doesn't die. Your subtle body does not die when the gross body dies. That's very, very clear. So, once we understand that, even on just ordinary considerations, what's the whole point of education? Why does every civilized society have a system of education? Not even civilized, even the uncivilized, Aborigines running around and hunting animals in the forest. They know that they have to teach the youngsters how to shoot the bow, how to do this, how to run, in order for them to be members of society when they grow up. So that concept of training the mind, understanding things, getting education, getting knowledge, so that one will have a better next life, that's there even in the present lifetime. But the real thing is, because no matter what you achieve in this life, it probably repeatedly says in this purport, you may be a politician, you may be a leader, you may be, have so much fame or money or whatever it may be. But all that's going to be taken away from you. And you're going to move on to another stage. So the question should be, for the intelligent person, how can I act in this lifetime so that I get the best future life? Now, there's also a material way of thinking of that, and that is the whole, in the Vedic culture, and that is the whole Karmakanda section of the Vedas. You know, I'm not just going to enjoy my senses at random here and perform all kinds of sinful activities, because I understand that will produce a tremendously difficult and painful future life. You know, the hells are, I mean, fifth canto is coming up. And at the end of that fifth canto, I remember I was working on that. That was part of my assignment in the marathon. It's commonly thought that CC was, but there's also a bunch of chapters, the latter chapters of the fifth canto that were part of that marathon. And it happened to fall to me to work on those chapters. And I remember looking at, you know, working late at night and reading all this thing. Wow, you know, if you have illicit sex, you're forced to embrace a hot iron, you know, form of the opposite sex for thousands of years, you know. And so many other explicit, you know, descriptions of the hells. And then at the end there, Shukadeva Goswami tells Parikshit, and this is just a sampling of them. There's millions of other hells, you know, varieties just custom made for yours. But it's sobering. You know, the Christian religion has their fire and brimstone, but the problem is that's all they have as an inspiration or an impetus to be religious. It's really based on fear and trembling. You know, okay, I'm not going to do any sin. Then with the whole confession thing, to try to expiate the sin so you won't have to suffer. But the problem is you're not expiating the characteristics that you're developing in association with the modes of nature that are forcing you to perform sin. And so it's a very depressing situation. And therefore, as I mentioned yesterday, I think it was yesterday, that people have rejected religion in America more than ever before. Formal religion. Less than 50% identify as one of the established religions in America, which is the first for many, many years. Because it doesn't pertain, you know, and there's so many scandals, you know, mass scandals where the leaders of religion cannot really avoid sin and perform horrible activities, and you know, and so they've lost faith. But that doesn't change the laws of nature. We're talking about the laws of nature here. There's still activities which, if you perform, are going to give you tremendous pain and suffering in the future, unless you take up Krishna consciousness, and those activities and those sinful reactions are eradicated by the process of devotional service. We hear so much of that. I remember I think it's in the Hari Bhakti Vilas, there's a section on the holy name, and literally hundreds and hundreds of verses about the glories of the holy name, and so many of them are dealing with how just one chanting or just a little involvement with the holy name you know, expiates so many sinful reactions, you know. But for devotees, this is, you know, important, especially when you're first learning about Krishna consciousness, how purifying it is and how auspicious it is. But really, the attraction in Krishna consciousness is Krishna. it's really the attractiveness of Krishna and his pastimes, his name, his form, his qualities, and the whole material world. Prabhupada talks about Goloka Vrindavan here. You're entering into Nitya Lila Pravishta, really entering into the eternal pastimes that are going on in the spiritual world. So that's the unique factor, really, in the Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy, is the focus and tremendous literature that has been revealed Shastra, of the details of Krishna and his Leela and his associates, and how we're welcome there. We have a place there. You know, we don't have to be knocking on the outside of the door. You know, and Krishna consciousness helps us really to ultimately, successfully, to discover our eternal identity in that spiritual world. You know, this is the positive attraction that should induce us to practice strictly devotional service. On one side here, you have the sobering fact that everything you do in this world, every moment has an effect on your subtle body. And that subtle body, your mind and intelligence, is the template upon which your next gross body is being formed. And when everything is done and this gross body, it's a machine. It's just a machine. It's an incredible, complicated machine, but all machines break down eventually. And when the time comes when you have to leave this body, you know, the next body is already waiting for you. You know, you've already formed your mentality, and you're going there. So it's a revelation which, if we believe it, if we have faith in this philosophy, and there's so many places in the Bhagavatam where similar explanations are given, you know, because this is what we need to really wake us up out of the spell of Maya and the illusion that somehow we have a home here on the material plane, and that this identity of ours is going to, you know, continue forever. It's obvious illusion, and you can see, you know, here we are in Pacific Beach. I don't know if it's every day, but several times a week at least. I hear outside my window an ice cream truck. I don't know if you hear it. Did you ever hear it? He's coming down here. And I'm thinking, is he really crying in the wilderness here? Doesn't he know on Pacific Beach there's basically no little kids? Have you ever seen kids running around? No. It's a party town. You know, it's a place where people come, they want to go on the beach, and a lot of surfers, you know, or just young people, you know, I don't know, either they're wealthy or they're going to school, whatever it is. But there's hardly any kids. I remember when Mohan Vilas lived here, you know, and his kid was growing up, brilliant little girl, you know, and she was like the only girl around, only kid around, you know, in my area. So it's this illusion, and of course with the COVID, it's really been, the lid has been on it. You know, all the parties, you know, it hasn't been able to have. But now with slightly restriction, you know, comes Friday, Saturday night, oh boy, they're all partying, like trying to make up for a year's, you know, lockdown, whatever. But that's gross ignorance. You know, it's really tragic, because all of that partying, and of course with intoxication, illicit sex go with it. It completely makes you forget this kind of thing. I mean, even if you know something about it, it puts you in the mood of enjoyment and sense gratification, as if you'll never die, as if you're eternal. You know, this is what the fallacy of it. And so the Bhagavad philosophy, Srila Prabhupada came, all the acharyas come to wake us up. Get up, you know, uttista jagata prapavaran nibodita. There's this very nice saying from the Upanishads. Uttista, get up, wake up. Uttista jagata prapavaran nibodita, and try to understand the great boon you have as a human form of life. And it's meant to be used for self-realization, for tapasya. Nayam deho deha bhajanga loke Kashtan kaman harati vidbhujanghe Tapo divyam putakayena sattvam Shuddhe jasma brahma saukyam tvanantam. Prabhupada gave at least a dozen or more lectures on this verse in India when he was traveling around city to city. For those who, you know, listen to Prabhupada's lectures, suddenly he's giving a lecture on this one verse again and again. So important. It's same idea. Same idea. He's Lord Rishabdev is about to retire. He's an incarnation of Krishna, but he's going to take on amazing austerities, you know, as an example. And he gathers his 100 glorious sons, headed by Bharat, and the 9 Yogendras are amongst them also. And he gives this, and the first thing he does is he says, basically, don't waste this precious human life, O friend, by working hard for haggish happiness. Through abnegation, worldly life transcend and learn to taste divine love's endless bliss. So he's saying there, that was my little take on it, it's based on it, isn't it? But he's saying, those who have attained a human form of life should not work hard, just like hogs, for material happiness. He uses that very word, vibhujange. Rather, one should perform divine penance, tapo divyam. Now, tapa can be performed for demonic purposes, as we know very well from Hiranyakashipu. So tapasya has to be qualified. It's not just any austerity. Everybody is performing austerity. they're getting in their cars and get 4 o'clock in the morning, driving 50 miles, to go to work. But it's divine penance. It's austerity aimed at purification of the heart, purification of the consciousness and soul. Why? So you can enjoy unending happiness. It's not that we're against enjoyment. We're against self-destructive enjoyment that simply leads to great suffering. The pleasure that derived from the contact of the senses with the sense objects produces misery. And on top of that, it's temporary. Therefore, the wise don't delight there, take their pleasure there. So we should be wise. But it doesn't mean that we have to renounce all enjoyment. We should perform austerities that purify our consciousness, purify our senses, and purify our very being, so that we can come to the stage of enjoying unending happiness, Brahma Saukyam. And that Brahma Saukyam is Krishna consciousness, is all the bliss we hear about in the eternal relation with Krishna. So that's the promise. And Rishabdev, of course, goes on with so many other important verses. But here, the same. After all that we've heard, he's giving this basic information, and of course it works. In a few verses I read ahead, and Prachanabhari gives up all of his sacrifices and goes to the forest, and he practices austerities for purification and Krishna consciousness. But here it's so instructive. And Prabhupada goes. There was one politician. I'm not going to name him. But he was also a general, and he became the leader of a country. And he was in a coma for years before he finally left his body. Yes, I can let you know who it is afterward. And Prabhupada, he focuses on this. That is such a hellish life. I mean, you really you're ready to die, but you're so much attached, to the position that you have that you can't reconcile it, and somehow it's arranged to just be in a state of unconsciousness, for a long time. Oftentimes it's no more than a week you hear about it, and then there's the ghostly body, you really are so much attached to your present body, and that you're in between. You're kind of in limbo. You don't have a gross body, but you have all those desires to enjoy, so you try to haunt someone and enjoy through their body. Ghosts are real. And I remember in Brooklyn, devotees would complain. I never experienced it, because it used to be a convent, and they would have homeless people like they have, and they would invite them in, and they'd take care of them, and they would die there. And so there were a lot of ghosts around. And Prabhupada says, if you ever have any ghosts, just chant Hare Krishna. So they weren't in the temple room, but they were up in the higher places where devotees would sleep. Anyway. So this is, all of these dangers are there. If you just, kind of follow your natural way and don't cultivate any transcendental knowledge or even the basic knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, it becomes a tragic waste of human life. And this is why the great acharyas are so eager to preach, to try to inject this knowledge. The knowledge is the key. Because as human beings, we can control the lower self by the higher self, provided that the intelligence is strengthened and purified by transcendental knowledge. So Srila Prabhupada came to give the knowledge and the method to realize the knowledge, both the practice and the knowledge, And so he had his books, and of course he would speak as long as there were listeners, and he had his method, the chanting of the holy name, which opens up the heart to hear the knowledge. You become purified just by that, and if you're fortunate, you have some assets in previous life, perhaps of devotional service, then you'll hear, and the fortunate few will take it to heart and begin seriously practicing, and attain, as we've just had wonderful Gaur Purnima, and I always like to think of like Lord Chaitanya's internal and external reasons for Krishna having those external reasons for coming as Lord Chaitanya. And we should also have that, is that having been given this knowledge and given this method and experiencing it to some degree, the benefits, we should try to give it to others. And that in itself is very pleasing to Krishna, and he gives you more taste and gives you more receptivity and understanding of the science. So this is, Prabhupada is such a rich purport here. He quotes so many essential verses. This Purushak Pakatisto hi Bhunkte Pakati Janganana. I always like that one so much. Again, it's so practical. The living entity in nature, that's us, Pakatisto. Bhunkte Pakati Jangunan. Bhunkte can mean experience. I looked it up. It often means enjoy, but it means experience, enjoy or suffer. Prakati Jangunan. He experiences the results of his association with the different modes of nature. He's situated in Prakriti and generated from Prakriti of the gunas, and as you associate with those gunas, you enjoy or suffer. And so then comes our agency also. Karanam gunasangosya. Sadasad yoni janmasu. So this is the destiny. Sadasad yoni means a species of life. You take birth in a certain species of life, either a good or bad one. A good one is a human life, especially if it's in a family of devotees. That's the best birth. But it's certainly better than lower animals, which are asat yoni. So, but the guna sangha, how you associate with the modes, is the cause. Because that produces the mentality, that produces the subtle body. So there's our agency as human beings. We can choose to associate with this mode or that mode. And that means we choose to eat this thing, we choose to listen to this music, we choose to hang out with those people. All of that. In the 17th chapter, you read about Arjuna asks, what happens to those who don't follow the Shastra? What is their destiny? And Krishna describes all different things in the different modes of nature. Different foods and how they affect the consciousness and other things. So that's within our agency. We can decide on the basis of knowledge that we acquire from the Shastra what and whom to associate with and what to reject. And that's going to form our mentality and form our destiny. So that's why, we have this, if you forgive me, I'm not going to go through the whole thing again, although I'm tempted to, the Sadhu Sangashtaka from Kapila Dev. Right at the beginning of his instructions, just maybe 10 verses in, he gives this wonderful instruction on the importance of association with sadhus, with devotees. So he starts out with a very verse that's right out of this could be out of this section. And he says, "Prasangam ajanam pasham, atmanak kavayo vadu, sahesha sadhu shukato moksha dwaram apavatam." So prasanga, there's sangha and there's prasanga. That prefix pra always intensifies. So it means serious, prolonged, intense association. Ajanam pasham, all of that sangha that we've experienced up to now has created all these ropes in the heart, these strong desires. Ajanam pasham means very strong ropes. But the wise soul knows that those very strong ropes of attachment have to be redirected toward the sadhus. The first thing is the representative of Krishna. Atmanak kavayo vidu sahesha sadhusha moksha dwaram apavatam. Mundane attachment keeps us bound to birth and death infernal. But love for sadhus opens wide the doors to life eternal. I'll put it into a little poem. That's actually what it takes. And this is the most, Srila Prabhupada's greatest gift, which really encompasses all the others, was his own association. He came and he was so attractive because he was so Krishna conscious, completely Krishna conscious, that his very being, his words and his aspect, and especially his interest and empathy for everyone is attractive for us. So that plus the chanting and everything else he gave, the knowledge, he was able to attract, and he's still attracting. That's the books are all attractive if you're open to them, and that's why it's nice to read amongst others. I'm sure you must have had many reading sessions with devotees, as you go to the Dham, his famous Vaisheshika Prabhu. Keshava Bharati Maharaj has made it a whole lifestyle of just reading Prabhupada books out loud to others. Where are you going to find others? On Facebook. He's got a whole Facebook page. I don't know how many hundreds of devotees listen to him, reading the Shastra with, feeling. So that's a great attractive feature. The Krishna appears through the sound, the holy name, and the books like Srimad Bhagavatam, and we're enjoined to drink it like an ambrosial beverage at the very beginning of Bhagavatam. You know, you have these 2 verses at the beginning of Bhagavatam kind of define, you know, the subject matter. The first verse is all about the Supreme Absolute Truth, Krishna's Supreme Absolute Truth, and the details about that. Next verse is all about the Bhagavatam, who is eligible to hear it, what the benefits are, you know, who wrote it, you know. And the third verse, it's all about nectar, the nectar of Bhagavatam. The Gammakal Galitam Palam Shukumukadamita Davasamyitam Babata Bhagavatam Rasamalayam Muhodaho Dasikabuvi Babuka. You know, giving you a taste for the poetry of Bhagavatam. This Bhagavatam is the ripened fruit of the tree of all the Vedic literatures. And in Prabhupada's immortal word-by-word meaning, synonym, this Juta Rasama Nigamakalapatado Galitam Palam Shukumakar Dravasamyutam. It means it's super ripe and super soft and easily swallowable. Just think of a mango that's so ripe that you know you're going to have to drink it. So you'd be over a bowl or something. You know, you cut it and practically you have to drink it. That's the Bhagavatam. So Pipata Bhagavatam there's an order there. It's imperative. Drink it. Pipata Bhagavatam. Rasamalayam. Drink this juice of the Bhagavatam to and beyond the point of liberation. In other words, it's not just meant to liberate you. It's meant to take you back to the spiritual world. Muhoraho, again and again. That's why Prabhupada started the class so important. Again and again, every day. Muho rasika bhuvi bhavas. Become a rasika, those who can drink the nectar of, rasika bhuvi bhavata, the most fortunate souls on the earth. So the Bhagavatam is the most dear literature for all real Vaishnavas, because it glorifies Krishna and his devotees, the process of devotional service, and gives so many details about the form and qualities and pastimes of Krishna's incarnations. So if we can learn to relish it, then that's a great opportunity, and we should pursue that relishment all the way back to Godhead. And, what's the science? The subtle body. The subtle body is being transformed. Krishna consciousness, the very name. Is this society and this whole movement, and Gaudiya Vaishnavism in general, is, Prabhupada says at the very end here, the mind is the cause of such an exalted position. After understanding Krishna, is eligible to enter Krishna Loka and associate with him. The mind is the cause of such an exalted position. The mind can also get one the body of dogs and hogs. So to absorb the mind always in Krishna consciousness is therefore the greatest perfection of human life. So given that opportunity, we should take it as the greatest gift that can be given, and take that gift and give it away. Because the more you give it, the more you get. Not like anything material. Okay. I'm going to read this translation again. Any comments or questions? The caterpillar transports itself from one leaf to another by capturing one leaf before giving up the other. Similarly, according to his previous work, the living entity must capture another body before giving up the one he has. This is because the mind is the reservoir of all kinds of desires. Any thoughts, questions, objections? Okay. Oh.
The purport, Prabhupada brings up Nitya Leela Pravishta, entering the eternal pastimes of Krishna. Some devotees, they chant that before, glorifying the Premadwani to the different acharyas, Srila Prabhupada, and sometimes they go. I don't know if I'm sure you've heard this, but I've heard that. Some devotees that kind of disagree with that, and I was just wondering why exactly they disagree with it. I don't know if they disagree with it because they think, oh well, maybe these devotees, went to another place to preach, or the conception is, well, they're still here,
I thought you were going to say, is that it?
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say that because. as far as I know, and Raj, you may have something on this, that this is not something that we invented here in ISKCON, right? It's probably there from in the Gaudiya tradition. And because there's a twofold thing. One is that the great devotees, these great acharyas, Mahabhagavats, they're sent here. It's not that, we should always understand, they've been sent here by Krishna to preach. And so they're different, by that's one of the many ways in which they're different than us. We weren't sent here; we fell down here. And so, as you read in the CC, especially chapter 8 of the Majjhima Lila that talks with Ramananda Roy, is that we're meant to, the great devotees, especially, are already doing it, and we're meant to come to that point ultimately, but living on two planes. Within, they're always relishing their eternal relationship with Krishna, the service, And externally, they're dealing with the material world, preaching, meeting with others, they're able to. So they never really left that Leela. That's the point. So why say they enter it? But I think it's a kind of a colloquial thing in the sense of by observation, they were here, and so. The conception is that now, they're back. They return back there. It's not. I can see the reason why it's subjective, but because it's traditional, I think that's the understanding. Is that we can be sure that Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta, etc., all of them are in Goloka Vrindavan in their original forms and serving Krishna eternally. So therefore, to understand, they spend some time with us, and now they're up there. So I don't know if you want to add anything, Raj, but that's the way I understand it. It's not offensive. It's something that's just a statement of understanding of their eternal place in the spiritual world. We don't do it here. I never did it, but we can start doing it if you want. Nityalila Bhavishtam Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Parishakacharya. Prema Dwani?
Yeah, only generally they say Paramahamsa Srila Dravida Dasa He's not a Dravida Dasa. Every one of those terms that we say is John.
That's true. Yeah.
It wouldn't be apt to call him a Dravida Dasa.
Right.
Because they shorten it, like for somebody like Srila Prabhupada, I don't know why you couldn't say all of it. They always shorten it, so in my mind, it's so that they would use but it seemed like John Paramahamsa Dravida, you're appreciating what he did in this.
Yeah.
In Nityalila Pravishta, Paramahamsa, you're appreciating that this is a prasad, a parashad of the Lord.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. So in other words, you're acknowledging or glorifying both the states, the eternal internal state, and the merciful time they spent with us here to help us come back to that.
Meditation, of course, is the way. So I want to hear, you cannot be in a coma without being on life support.
Yeah, for sure.
So his family so mercifully let him be hooked up for years to life support and get a vegetable. Wow, that's nice.
I'll tell you privately. I don't want to mention the name because it's kind of a controversial figure, and I don't want to, but I'll tell you who it was. And I mean, the very thought, and it's true. It seems to be more. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's common. Prabhupada says, especially the politicians. I've heard him talk about that a lot. Yeah. But also the idea is that you really want to hang on to that position, In other words, you don't want to leave that position. You'd crawl up, who knows what you had to do to get up there, And then there also may be underneath the suspect, oh boy, I'm going to suffer for what I had to do to get there, so let me just stay in there. I don't know what it is, but it's I was with you actually with a couple of times with seeing devotees pass, And it's a whole different experience. I mean, that's Shamali, you know, it was so nicely documented and shown, you know, and you know, the way she just kind of, you know, literally expired, meaning that she exhaled, and there was no, you know, terror or crying or anything, and it was because she was ready. She had been, you know, and what a blessed experience to be able to, you know, have hours of association with your spiritual master, you know, through the internet, you know, and speak, and so many devotees and her friends and her parents, you know. So when you have that knowledge and you really are confident, you know, then that the philosophy is real, then that's a whole different experience. Otherwise, it's, I mean, I've been in the hospital, it's horrible sometimes, you know, people going through so much. And what's really tragic is that, you know, they have no idea of all the science of transmigration. So all they want to do is, like, you know, sedate, you know. And people are in the bed, and, you know, in very extreme suffering, you know, so they sedate and they turn on the TV, and hours people are just trying. It's so horrible. It's just it's violence, really, and that's you know, the ignorance we live in. But devotees, you know, with friends around, especially, you know, chanting, you know, that's the most auspicious way to leave your body. And as it said, dear is tattva namuyati. We shouldn't be bewildered. There is a feeling of sorrow, you know, and crying because you're losing the association of a devotee. But at the same time, you're confident that they've gone to a better place, you know, to continue their service and go back to God. And maybe you're not sure, you know. So it's that's really one of the main fruits of devotional service. Something else?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. I think Rajendra Prabhu's microphone is switched off.
Ah. Okay. Is that all right?
Yeah.
So part of the class and purport dealt with the ghostly experience, overly attached to the body and therefore can't take on another gross body.
Yeah.
A godbrother of mine who did a lot of research, Puranas, this and that, and Kali Yuga is where the ghostly experiences really, really multiplies.
Really?
It's not the previous ages anywhere near. Like in Kali Yuga, this is where all these people are being forced to suffer that kind of experience.
Yeah.
And this is probably about it's not Shastra, like quoting a statistic or something, but he said the people that are really hooked into this, you know, subtle beings and that whole experience, you know, some people, that's what they focus on, and they have awareness and reciprocations with that realm, etc.
Yeah.
So I found it interesting where he said that it's not easy once you're in a ghostly realm, possessing simply the subtle body, to get another gross body.
Yeah.
It's not easy. And he said there's a lot more living entities on the ghostly plane than there are here in the
Really?
did I say subtle plane? In the subtle plane than there are gross plane. And so many of them are wanting to, like, God, let me back in, but they're not being allowed. And he gave an example. Once you've become stuck there, to take on another gross body, it's like trying to put on 7 layers of clothes.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that. Yeah.
In other words, it's a complete, you know, because in one sense that is a subtler or higher realm of existence. Shabdev says that when talking about the levels of consciousness. But it's very difficult. So it's not something playing with intoxication or dealing in the mode of ignorance. You're just asking for a ticket to a ghostly realm.
And I'm telling you, sometimes you can see people are, you know, they've already kind of in a ghostly realm. You know, the madness. I mean, we live in an age where people are losing their bearings. You know, there's so much tension from this COVID thing with lockdown and everything. Mental health, you know. Suicides are up, even among young people. Which suicide is a classic way of becoming a ghost. So we should be very thankful. We have Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
closely situated.